All right, thanks, folks. So this title of Redress and Urban Planning, earlier today we talked about redress, that key issue. We didn't name pan-nativism, but that's another word on that list, those of terminologies. Pan-nativism is that kind of incipient colonial device that makes Indigenous people, Indigenous Canadians, rather than Tsleil-Waututh or Musqueam, Squamish or Kwantlen. And so when we think about terminology, we're also sometimes stuck on these colonial terms. We just had a session on public art, and we really quickly immediately said, well, there's, Christie was talking about, there's no word for, per se, art. I don't know if there's a word for urban planning in Hunkamina, or so nevertheless, we're going to have a session. This vessel is perhaps my mentor, Kamala, talks about Indigenous cities, and she's, I think you're the first Indigenous planner, and certainly in Vancouver. So it's great to have Kamala join us for this session. And so we're, hey. So we'll call it urban planning, but it's really not urban planning. So one thing that we argue for is redress, and let's call it redress civic infrastructure. So earlier I mentioned this project, the Vancouver Art Gallery. The economic reconciliation component that's missing currently from the VAG project is economic justice for Coast Salish artists. That's why a permanent art gallery inside the VAG is actually, I would argue, more important than the wrapping, the beautiful wrapping that's happening. Admittedly, it's important in terms of the face of the land to have that wrapping, but over the long term, the revenues, the economic justice is not accruing to Coast Salish artists. That's the Vancouver Art Gallery, admittedly, 99% of the artists that I've ever shown there are not Coast Salish, right? So if you think about the Guerrilla Girls and that legacy of feminist critique of the white male institutions of art, we can also apply that with the Coast Salish lens and look at the fact that Coast Salish artists are not going to benefit from that building until we force the VAG to put a permanent gallery in there. But other infrastructure projects like community centers, housing projects, when there's millions of dollars on the table, I think Cory made that point of like, where is the presence? Where's the economic justice? Where's the careers being built from young people who don't just get given a broom in Blade Runner's program and say, here's your job in the construction industry, but those young people are said, you can be an architect, you can be an engineer, you can be a designer, you can be a planner. All these careers that have historically not been accessible to Coast Salish youth. So that's a bit of an introduction. We're debating on whether we want to think about how we do this transformation. Kamala uses the word transformation. There's perils with standardization. There's perils of bureaucratizing these systems. I said earlier in the day, Christie Lee and I were on a call yesterday, and like really, really frustrated that we're talking to one department and they're siloed in this municipal system and they refer to this other department. And we're like, but you can just take the responsibility. You don't need to refer it to the reconciliation office, because it's just like the referrals desk at the local nations. They're overwhelmed. And so to Cory's point, are we resourcing adequately that consultation process? And so if we can explore some of these questions around how do we transform the process, how to bring justice to city building, can we have a period of resurgence for Coast Salish people where we get away from this pan-nativism, we say to the urban Indigenous community and the visitors, including the white and non-white settlers, this is a time, a renaissance time for the next decade where we fully, all of us in the room, prioritize, if we're in Vancouver, MST priorities. If we're in Surrey, we prioritize Kwantlen and Semiahmoo. That we just show up for a decade. And it's really hard for people because they're sitting back going, well, I don't know what to do, and it's not our call. And it's like, no, actually, it can be your call to prioritize Coast Salish artists, planners, designers right now. So, Kamala, do you want to share some opening thoughts?
Sure. I'll just, because I haven't participated yet today, and so a lot of people probably don't know who I am, and you guys have had a chance. So sure, I could say a bit about myself. Yeah, and it's good to be in the room with all of you and to be in this beautiful place here. I took the ferry over from Gibson's where my family and I moved like 10 years ago now. But I was born and raised in these lands of Hunkaminam and Squamish-speaking people. My own ancestors don't come from these lands. So my dad is a first generation of Eastern European German immigrants. And my mom is Korean Métis, who come from different Métis settlements like Red River and St. Paul de Métis and other places that Lac La Biche, and places that I can now point to and talk about, but really haven't spent much time because I grew up here and my children were born here. And so we've literally been, nurtured and grown by these beautiful lands. So, in trying to learn my teachings, I'm the daughter of Loretta Todd, the filmmaker, who, was very active in the 80s and up to now. And I definitely have learned from her about my responsibilities to these lands, cultural teachings of gratitude and reciprocity, and sharing our skills and our gifts towards healing and towards transformation. And then all of my learning has come from friends and teachers from these lands like Christie and Cease and others who have welcomed our family so warmly and shared with us, what it means to live here. And so somehow I ended up working at the City of Vancouver, even though I never wanted to work for government, and ended up, I'll probably go into film like my mom, but basically at the exact same time, I started doing video and also started working in social planning, as it was called then. And I started calling myself the Aboriginal Social Planner, but it wasn't an official title. There was no Aboriginal specific role at the time, but I had the mandate to build relationships with the Aboriginal community at the time. And so I just wanted to quickly share that, over that period, that it was basically 2000 when I first started there, and up until today. So I didn't stay there the whole time. I went and raised my kids and did freelance work. But then I came back when the Indigenous Arts and Culture Planner position was created. And that was in a whole new era where there's like lots of Indigenous planner positions now, where there's the official territorial acknowledgement, and up until today of, the time of UNDRIP. And so I just want to say that in the time when I first started, there was absolutely no relationship whatsoever with the people of these lands. There was this, complete erasure. The Aboriginal community was what Irwin was saying, that pan-Indigenous idea, mostly people from other territories. And so when I would talk to people about, well, what about the local nations, the rights and title holders of this place, I would be told, well, but they're on reserve, they're treaty, that's a federal, why would a city work with the local First Nations who are over there? And so it was really a matter of addressing that erasure and that lack of acknowledgement because of, this myth that this was an empty land. And so a lot of how we did that was through stories and through, we did a project called Storyscapes, which was about, oral history interviews, and the public art piece that Christie mentioned with Susan Point, because we were told how harmful it was that all of those carvings were there from other territories and nothing was there to show whose lands these are, especially given the violent history of what had happened on that particular site. And so it was just really like the recognition that arts and cultures, sharing stories, addressing that invisibility and that erasure is a really powerful way to help bring that transformation. And so basically it's been since the territorial acknowledgement and the Dialogues Project and the Olympics and all kinds of different things, and then the people from these lands continuously sharing stories, advocating, affirming their rights and presence here and continuity here. And so it's just incredible to witness those changes. But as we've heard, not much has changed. I think people are really taking on the hard work of making those changes, and the government and the city is slowly starting to respond and get it. But I have many examples of stories that I could share. People want to hear, including right here. I can just share this one where when I was at the city, they're looking at planning the Olympic Village, and they were like, oh, hey, we need to name some streets. What should we name them? And I was like, well, clearly you should reach out to the language speakers of these lands, and here's an opportunity to restore the language to the land. And then we ended up with Athletes Way and Walter Hardwick Way and so on. So all kinds of missed opportunities. But that recognition is slowly becoming part of how things are done, in terms of so working on another project where there's a direct relationship with the nations. But you're right, so often it's just like a consultant. So where is the place for the people of these lands to be directly involved in the designing and shaping their lands. And that's right now where I think the work needs to happen. Where it's like, sure, you might have somebody from the local nations or another nation advising on your project, but then at the end of the day, it's still the non-Indigenous designers who get to shape and plan and write their ideas onto the land. So that's where I feel personally the shift is needed. And I think UNDRIP presents that possibility, and the government-to-government relationship with the nations presents that possibility. So that's my quick little overview. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kamala. Yeah, and it's nice to see, I'm grateful that you're here today, because you have that longitudinal approach, and you can see how systems do change, how departments emerge, policies emerge. Mm-hmm. Cory and Christie Lee, do you have reflections on that journey when you hear Kamala's being at it, coming and going, and really emphasizing storytelling and lifting up local stories?
I do, and thank you for starting that framework. It hasn't been without. I don't know how to address this. Having been removed from my own identity for as long as I have, I chose post-secondary education as a commitment. It was something that my father had wanted to establish within our household. I didn't realize it then, but I realized it after. So I went on to study engineering and architecture, and had become employed in the industry of architecture. And I made a statement earlier. If you look around the city of Vancouver, I've been living in the city of Vancouver for close to 20 years. I'm a stranger in my own territory. The architectural and planning industry they have been integral in our erasure of our own identity in our own territory. And I'm only speaking to the city of Vancouver. This is every Indigenous community on Turtle Island. So I chose to step away from the architectural industry and develop a process to get involved in the industry as a cultural advisor to bring a stronger identity in the architectural and planning process, challenging industry leaders, architects, landscape architects, engineers, and even calling back to municipalities. Municipalities are typically going to be responsible for approving a project without any form of Indigenous engagement. But as soon as I'm involved in these projects, I start to activate an Indigenous voice in that process. And I've had the fortunate experience of working with I don't know if Ginger Gosnell's name has been mentioned, but I'm partnered up with her on a number of different project initiatives. And we've actually been able to develop new policies within the city of Vancouver. I don't know if you've read the Broadway plan, but we integrated a cultural ribbon to be a line item along Great Northern Way. So I see a bright future as far as how far we can push this visual identity in project initiatives within the local municipality here within the city of Vancouver, but they're leading the charge. Our neighboring municipalities are watching what the city of Vancouver is doing. Federal and provincial government bodies are watching what the city of Vancouver is doing. There's an international eye on what we're doing here in the city of Vancouver. This is now a marketable opportunity for a number of industry leaders to come and participate in how the city of Vancouver is shaped around that dedicated effort to Musqueam and Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh's identity. We have a large number of architectural companies that are coming here to compete on projects where we are wanting to bring an identity. And I'm called upon daily to participate in this RFP process. It's there, it's ripe for the taking. And there are very few of us that are actually providing a high level of guidance and support in this industry. And that's what we're trying to develop. We want to develop, and this goes back to an earlier statement that I had made, How do you activate voices from the community where it's not just government to government? How do you get members from the community to participate in a project in an industry that has shaped their territory?
Mm-hmm. Boom, that was a good one. Christy Lee.
All right. So funny, I was like debating. I'm like, oh, I'm still sitting up here. Should I still sit up here? I'm like, shoot, it's my land. I'm gonna be up here. But I'm so thankful that I get to share again this space with Kamala and Cory, because yeah, we all bring different perspectives. We all, you know, like kind of do the same work, but do it in different ways. And like, I don't represent. I'm not a, you know, official Musqueam representative from the administration or from the chief and council, and I'm not, you know, I'm not official city rep, or, you know, I don't work for an organization or anything. I'm just me living out, you know, my right. And I was talking about this last night with my partner, and we're talking about our different roles, and like not everyone's he was asking, oh, how come you guys don't have a smokehouse in your family? And I said, oh, I never thought of that. We never needed a smokehouse. Like our family isn't a family of fishermen, and our family isn't a family of, you know, carvers or what have you. And I said, oh, I was like, oh, it's because we all carry different roles, right? And when I look back at the name I carry and the work that my ancestors have done, and I'm so thankful. Like Kamala has gotten to work with some of my ancestors who are ancestors now. But I'm like, oh, it's just the work that we've always done. Like I've always been, you know, this Salish woman, and this lineage passed down of like, you know, keeping stuff in order, and, you know, making sure everything's set in the right way, and, you know, making sure the language is taken care of. When you open up a lot of the language history, a lot of it comes from in Hunkaminam dialect in this land. It comes from my great grandparents, Andrew and Christine Charles, and you can, you know, look them up and look up all the other ancestors too, like from people from the Point family and the Guerin family, and our language speakers, our ceremonial carriers. And, you know, that's just always been this way of how we set our laws, right? And I'm so thankful that Kamala has always, you know, reached out to me. I've been lucky enough to come and be a part of something. Always just brings me in somehow. If it's not art, it's language or performance or poetry or, you know, cultural consulting or something like that. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, there's ways that we can take this transferable knowledge. And like, you know, a lot of us Indigenous people were trained in our ways, right? Like we are the experts. We, like Cory was saying, we're the architects and the archaeologists. Like we've been doing these roles since time immemorial, and we have things that we'll share with you, and there's a lot of things that we don't share with you, and we're not ready to share with you. I was saying, like back there when we were looking at the questions, I was speaking with Anna, she works for the Parks Board, and I'm just so thankful how passionate she is about, you know, being an ally and supporting and walking with us. And I was saying, I was like, you know what, we're lucky. Like we just like to do this, right? This is our job. We're artists. We like to do these things. But then there's our people in our community who just do it. They're just living every day, their cultural lives, and they're like, oh, we don't care about, you know, what gathering you guys are having. It's freaking duck hunting season. We're going out and getting some ducks, or it's, you know, it's time to harvest this or that or whatever, right? So we have to give, you know, much love and respect to everyone, each one of our people in our communities. And yeah, I'm so thankful I've got to work on projects to help create change and to bring my voice in a community level, within my family too. Like we have family meetings to talk about, you know, things that we want to do within our family groupings, and then community level and here in this urban area, along with the city and the different municipalities. But also lately, I've been working with different levels of governments and helping create change, specifically UMBCIC as a consultant, helping them guide processes. Back in June, they had an Indigenous laws gathering here, and they were like, oh, can you help us, you know, do the opening prayer and the lunch prayer and the closing of the day? And I'm like, was like, oh, where's the Indigenous law from these lands? Like, oh, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, you're bringing in, you know, chiefs and you know, federal and provincial municipal government representatives, and you're talking about Indigenous law, but where are the representatives from the people of these lands? We carry Sinu, we carry Snowias, we have Indigenous laws that we still follow to this day, and we're very, very strict on how we do it. So then I made them change the whole agenda and spent a lot of their money because we need, you know, we need to feed people. We need to make sure people are taken care of, you know, their parking, like I said this morning. You guys need to reimburse me 15 something, by the way. So take care of their parking and feed them and have nice, comfortable chairs to sit on, right? If I were inviting you into my longhouse and you were my honored guest, I'd make sure you'd have a nice, cozy, warm place to sit. And that's why I'm sitting in this chair. But then, yeah, so there's ways that we can do that, right? And we can work together and we can do it respectfully without, you know, disrespecting the nations or disrespecting families' protocols. And that's what we do as Coast Salish people, right? We come from these different ways and I'm so thankful. Thank you. Hi, Chika. I'm so thankful. I can't talk about it, but I come from a sacred society that was born out of Stanley Park, actually. And it's my birthright to practice that. And I can pass it on to my daughters, and my son, you know, can dance the dance. And if something's going wrong within our society, all the representatives from the people who belong to the society in Coast Salish territory, we come together and we sit and we say, hey, you know, this is what happened over here and that happened over there. How do we fix it, or how do we stop it, or how do we make it better? And that's what we can do, right? We can just sit down and talk and say, hey, you know, we can do these things together. And we always find a way in our Hualmoch way. We either stop it and say that's not going to be done here, or we find a way to make it happen together. And just last week, I had the honor again of working on a women's gathering. All week there was a gathering for specific claims, talking about, you know, all these different things that are happening across Indigenous country and our rights, our inherent rights, and the things we're fighting for. And then at the very last day, it was a women in specific claims gathering, because during the development of the reservation systems and documenting of creating of these cities, our women's voices were excluded. And it's also, there's many stories in our history where, you know, the markings of these lands and the different territories, and, you know, they only talked to some of the men that were there. They didn't document the women when we were home taking care of the babies and you know, cleaning house and cooking food. And shoot, I barely get sleep. I got to go home and cook a meal for 6 after this. But those are the things that we do. And so last week they said, hey, like, how do we invite women, and how do we bring the women together? And that's what we did. We invited all the women who are from the different nations, who are expert in what they do, experts in language, experts in we had Cease and her daughter Sanakwala come and share a tea blending workshop. But that's the importance of you know, the medicine and the connection to the land and the connection to the inherent right and to the generational right that we're passing down, and putting it back into the space. And we had speakers from the 3 nations, women from the 3 nations come and speak. And we invited matriarchs from like different communities to come, and we all sat around and we're like, oh, now we're going to call this, like, we need our own organization, Union of BC Indigenous Matriarchs, right? And now we need all the funding, and all our voices are back, and now it's been recorded that, you know, women, you know, we have these rights and these powers. And when you look around at a lot of the house posts, some of them are women because we have that connection of telling stories. And I can go on and on, but I'll just leave it at that.
I was just thinking, before we have our last session with the Salish speakers again, Kamala, perhaps we can hear from you one more time.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow off what Christie got me thinking about in general, thinking that probably a lot of people here are from non-Indigenous organizations or government. And I think, like, even though we're seeing a lot of change, I think there's sometimes this idea of like, oh, we just need to incorporate, we just need to include. So that's, you hear a lot of times about this tokenistic. And it is often with this idea of like, okay, well, as long as we recognize and acknowledge and include, so we'll do like a sustainability project and we'll make sure that we include the perspective of the local nations, which obviously is a given that should happen. But it needs to go beyond that and deeper than that, because it can obviously become an extractive thing, where it also can become a thing of like, oh yeah, we have their perspective, and meanwhile we'll continue with business as usual, and we'll continue with the system as it is and the power structures as they are. So in the case of something like sustainability, it's, the reminder that we heard really strong from Christie just now around rights, and that it's not just, let's make the city greener for everybody. Let's make the city greener, make sure we incorporate, Indigenous teachings, but it's actually, you need to clean this place up for the rights holders of these lands, who have the right to be able to go and pick berries and access those places and ceremony and all of those things that were here before that should, continue to exist. And so the language needs to shift, and it is shifting around rights and the enjoyment of rights and the practicing and exercising of rights, and how that can actually happen in an urban environment. It's not easy, but it has to be, in my experience, based on that fundamental recognition. Because I'll hear people be like, oh yeah, we need to incorporate more of Indigenous teachings into our work. And it's like, no, you actually need, yes, but you also need to go deeper. And so that also goes with the idea of like, oh, well, we'll include a consultant and then we have enough. But actually it's that designing, and it's the decision-making for the lands that restores the decision-making rights of the first people of the land. So how can you contribute towards upholding the first people's rights to make decisions for their lands, to have that self-determination over their lands? And so hopefully we're getting to that point gradually, but even just little things like, I will quickly mention two projects, one being the new park, the Parks Board project, the park naming, where I was approached to help facilitate a conversation with each of the nations, and it was definitely framed as, isn't this a great thing? The park board has said, hey, here's a new park, let's have the nations name it. But then in the first meeting, it was very clear, because the park had already been designed, just like we were saying, everything was already done, just like Brandon was saying, but hey, can the nations gift a name? And so the feelings were very, there was a lot of hurt there, and a lot of like, we need to let you see how you've approached this. People, non-native people, designed this place, decided what it should look like, could tell the story, and now you want us to put a name on it. And so there was a lot of learning that happened there for park board staff, and real respectful listening. And the shift that happened there was, at least now, all programming that happens at Sakochenum or Sotsakwe Park is just from the nation.
I was just going to ask who can say the name though.
Yeah, because I edited the videos, I heard it all the time. It's so beautiful in my mind, hearing their voices. So yeah, the public art is just from the local nations, the cultural programming, the plant knowledge, all of that is, at least reflects the name. And then hopefully next time around, when the new park happens, that won't happen. So yeah, I think that's a good example to end with, and the shift.
And I'm going to ask Cory to hold on to his thoughts, because you're just going to stay there, and we're going to bring up our other Salish speakers. But thank you, Kamala, for joining us on this session.
Yeah.
So do use the boards up in the back. And I also know there's some chat. Chelsea's gathering some observations from the chat online, and hello to our viewers online. We're going to send I think a survey to everybody who's come today and who's joined us online, because there'll be a way to capture a bit of opportunity for you to get more materials from us. Also for us to mail you the toolkit that we work on. And we'd love to probably get more questions than I see on the back, where you share with us, I really want this to be in the toolkit, or we've struggled with this, or here's a success story. So we'd love to have a bit more engagement with you in the future. And I also think, Cease, when we think about doing these on an annual basis, maybe we can also do these on a more frequent basis, maybe on a particular subject, whether it's a lunchtime brown bagger or an evening lecture, just something, because I think we're doing good work, and I'm grateful for all this incredible people that are agreeing to do the work today. And Carrie Lynn, thank you so much for helping us carry this challenging work. And thanks to all of the settlers, migrants, Indigenous people who are here today as well. Thanks for showing up and doing the work as well.
Hi, chap. Hi, chap to wetly almost. Some good listening today. I'll probably say it again. Maybe I teach too often teenagers, which they listen in their own way, and it's usually by not listening. So my side job for a long time, I was running an environmental consultancy in the Fraser Valley. And it was through doing not only the technical work, but the management of that environmental consultancy that I discovered that I had an ability to project manage. And when I left that job to do what I'm doing now, I took all my project management skills with me. And I often encounter angry mothers of artists. And they're like, my so-and-so doesn't get any of these opportunities. And it seems like I get a lot of opportunities. I'm super stoked for all the opportunities. But a big part of accepting an opportunity and successfully executing those jobs is business. And business and artistry are not synonymous. And so it's been through learning business and applying it to the art that I've been able to successfully operate an artistic practice. And I just want to thank the lady I was speaking to at lunch for asking, the question and about the art life, right? I've got a business art life and I've got a personal art life. And a personal art life is that my business pays for my research. It pays for my communal participation. It pays me to learn my language. I don't want government dollars to learn my language. I want to make enough money to pay myself to learn my language so that I don't have to write grants and applications and budgets. I just want to pay myself to do what I need to do. And that's success to me. And that's decolonizing my business to me as well.